more to say about the Arctic, but I do want to move on to the bottom of the world. So we go from the top to the bottom. Australia has missed out in the analysis. And I just wanted to ask you, when I write a chapter on my blog for Australia, very much in the style that you've written for Prisons of Geography, what are the main things I have to include? What can I not omit?
Well, you know better than I do.
I very much doubt that.
Well, first of all, you're a bloody long way from anywhere. Although actually that's not exactly true, is it? But you look to your left, if I'm looking at the map, you look to your left, you got what, 6,000 miles before you hit the African coast. And you look to your right, you got 7,000 miles before you hit the Latin American or American coast. And you got 2,000 miles back that way before you hit New Zealand. Now, above you, yeah, so that's your focus. Mm-hmm. So first of all, immediately you think, I don't have a navy. We haven't got a navy to keep the sea lanes open. Any fool could blockade us and we'll starve because we're not self-sufficient, especially in energy. So as soon as you look at the map, you think, better have a navy. Then where is the threat coming from? Nowhere, except up there.
You could say China's a pretty strong threat.
Yeah, well, we'll come to them, but in the first instance, it was Japan. And in those days, another thing immediately, we need a navy, but we need someone else's navy as well, the British. And you relied on the British. And then in 1941, your prime minister said very, very clearly in terms, we know London is not going to take care of us.
We're with the Yanks now.
The Japanese are just up there. Hi, America. And at that point, you jumped into the Americans' bed. And I don't blame you in the least. And the American, I think it was 150,000 US troops showed up into Darwin. Now it's China, but it's the same scenario. And America and you are natural allies for a number of reasons. Because, and that's why they've got the US Marine base up in, I think it's Darwin. And it's why, I don't know if you followed it recently, the Chinese are going to be opening a port in Papua New Guinea. Just for fishing. Yeah, right. So, you just look at the map and you know what Australia's going to do. It needs a navy, it needs to not be blockaded, but it needs a bigger friend. And this century, there'll be another choice to make. You ditched us, you went with the Americans. This century, you've got another choice to make. You're going to ditch America and go with the Chinese, or are you going to stick with America? Big choice. So at the moment, it's pretty obvious what you're going to do, but things change over decades. What else about Australia? It's a shame once you go over the Blue Mountains. Oh, it's all desert. They genuinely didn't know, did they? There's a professor in 1920 at Sydney University, the first geography professor.
Okay.
And he said, by 2000, the maximum population in Australia, 20 million. And he was castigated for this because they had this idea of originally of sea to shining sea, like the Americans got over the Appalachians, through the fertile Midwest, over the Rockies. Fantastic. You got over the Blue Mountains, and, which is why you all live where you live.
Yeah, just bush.
But they still said, no, we can make a big deal out of this place, Australia, and grow the population. But it was around 20 million. What is it now? About 25. 22. And
22, 23.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone a wee bit off topic, but you are growing.
No, you're directly on topic. It's Australia.
A finite amount of space. Oh, look, I could talk about a lot more about Australia, but you like everybody else, you are liberated and constrained by your geography. There's only one place to live. Mostly, it's that curve, and that's where the rivers are. That's the Murray-Darling Basin. Only one of which you can't get very far up it. That is where Australians live and will continue to live despite all the technology. You are a continent, but you're also I don't know the word for it. You're also a crescent.
Yeah. Two interesting things came to mind while you were saying that, but I just want to also say I think it's the case that only 5% of our land is arable. So we just have giant space, but you can't do much with much of it except store things and mine things. But you can't grow things and you can't live. And then
on the plus side, you've got, well, you had the coal, which, but of course now you're in two mines for obvious reasons about it. And I think, is it lithium? You've got some.
we got lithium, we got iron ore, we've got uranium.
I mean, you are the lucky country, but
for sure we are.
and also the territory also gives you some protection against invasion, because what's the point?
Yeah,
you can have a navy strong enough to protect that crescent. So if somebody wants to land in Darwin, well, they've got 2,000 miles before they get to anybody. Notwithstanding the good people of Darwin.
Such a good theme as well, and I've left that for the last question. But you made very obvious there the importance of the geography of a place in determining these things, because it's much bigger than just the politics. But two things that came to mind: natural allies. I'd like you to just expand on that for a bit. But first, you mentioned all the rivers are there in Sydney, and this is also a theme throughout Prison of Geography. You say in Africa, they've got the most beautiful rivers in the world, but you fall off a cliff every couple of kilometers. So what use are they? Because obviously, and then America, on the other hand, has these perfect rivers for transport, and England, Britain, likewise, perfect rivers for transport. So
give it time.
I wonder, are rivers still that important though? Because I mean, aren't trains rivers of their own, and we can sort of just more efficiently build our rivers? I mean, I'm not suggesting a canal, I'm more suggesting a train, but it's primarily for transport, right? Or is it all the water aspect as well?
Well, it's both, and you have a point that trains have taken the strain, but not much of it. But I don't know the figures off the top of my head when you break them down, but I know that 90% of the world's trade is carried on water. Even now, 90% is carried on water, and obviously a lot of that is the waterways, the internal canals, the rivers, etc., because then it remains so much cheaper to go by water. Obviously, it's slower, so it still is extremely important. And I've actually forgotten the question.
Natural allies.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. I'd say you were natural allies for a number of reasons. I mean, the history of Australia and its demographics, is obviously because of Britain and Ireland and other places in Europe. But increasingly, your demographics are changing, but your politics isn't particularly. You remain a very strong democracy, and so even if the demographics change, and you will no longer look back to the old country as much as you do. Why would you? But if you're creating a modern, multicultural, multi-ethnic, democratic Australia, you're less likely to ally with China. You will ally with fellow democracies, which are America.
That's what I was wondering. Just that
firepower to protect you.
Yeah.
And you have the same mindset. But also, I think Japan.
Okay.
I think they're a natural ally for you.
Are they a natural ally because they're not an ally to China? Is that a big part of this?
Well, yes, that's very much part of it. But it's also because they're a democracy.
Okay.
I mean, there are limits to this. I'm sure Turkey, all through when it was a dictatorship, when the colonels took over, it carried on being a NATO member. Sorry, but Japan, you're probably familiar with the Quad. India, Australia, Japan, America. This is the Quad that frames the Indo-Pacific region. And the Quad is increasingly, it's an informal agreement between the four countries, mostly the four countries' navies. But it's one that's growing in importance, and it is vis-a-vis the four relationships with China, all of which are not particularly good. And so the Quad precedes the last couple of years' serious difficulty with China, but the difficulties have strengthened the Quad. There's even something called the Quad Plus now. They're trying to get South Korea and maybe others into it.
Sure.
And I just think when you look at the geopolitics and then you look at the map, the Quad makes perfect sense, because in the middle of it, there's China.
Yeah.